earning additional income, a creative outlet, pursuing a passion. These are all reasons why people start side hustles. But none of them are the number one reason why I believe everyone should start a side hustle, specifically a CNC woodworking side hustle right now. So I want to share a personal story with you and how I got kind of career-wise, how I got to where I am today. In high school, I worked for a minor league baseball team. It was a summer job, and I worked on the grounds crew. So I ended up going to Michigan State University and getting a degree in sports turf management. I had an opportunity to work for the Detroit Tigers, for Michigan State University Athletics, for minor league baseball, and then turf manager at at the time, one of the largest sports complexes, youth sport complexes in the country. So you may be thinking, how in the heck did you go from growing grass to making YouTube videos? And I think that's a great question. I worked in that last position for 6 years, almost 7 years. Long story short, we were called into a meeting in April 2018, and we were told that the city was going to contract out the operations to a third party. Thankfully, the city offered to absorb us. I bought my first CNC in 2018, and it was almost a distraction at that point. Like, it was just projects, and it was fun. It was cool. I saw it on YouTube. I watched a lot of YouTube that final year at the job. So that led into getting into woodworking. Like everything I do, it turns into, how can I make money with this? One thing led to the next. Basically, I got the CNC business up while I was still working at that golf course. And then in 2020, I got on YouTube. So it's taken me a while to share that story. I don't know why, because it's very common. I'm not unique. This happens to people all the time. So in my mind, I was faced with a decision. Either I need to move my family and go get a different job somewhere, which a lot of people would be like, yeah, well, you moved to Kentucky to do that. Why wouldn't you just move back to Michigan or move? And those were all considerations. But my mindset at that time is, I don't want this to happen to me again. I don't want to bounce all over the place and work my tail off for someone else, make someone else money, and then just to have the rug pulled out from underneath me. I don't want to do that. So I leaned into my entrepreneurial background and built something that I felt like I could control better. I was determined to build something that I enjoyed making things, and feel like ultimately it's worth something. So all that leads to where we are now. I've been operating andybirdbuilds for 3 years full-time, and 5 years, the first 2 years being part-time. So what do I believe is the number one reason to start a CNC side hustle? Diversification. I think the number one reason, although we mentioned some very good reasons, I think the number one at the top, the most beneficial, and why everyone should do it, is to diversify our income streams and our skills. The more diverse our income is, the less reliant we are on one single thing. So if the one income stream changes or disappears, we're left struggling to find another one to replace that. And although that's completely possible, what I've found is most of the times that can upend your life, meaning you have to move, or you have to take a job that you necessarily don't want to. Skills are pretty much the same way. I think it's really important to develop something you're good at. I believe that we all have a skill set that we're good at, but it's really easy to get comfortable in what we're good at and only, basically be focused on that one thing. I'm an advocate of always learning how other things work, learning how other people do things, and gaining that perspective. And it's all in an effort to diversify my skills and to get better at what I do, but also to get wider, to get more skills. That way, if something changes or I get bored, I think that's a really big deal when you get into a career field and you're like, man, I just go to work every day and I do the same thing over and over and over again, and we get bored. So having a side hustle where we can lean into other skills and maybe use the other side of our brain. Maybe we're in an analytical job and we need to be, we want to have a little more creativity. Diversifying our income and our skills comes down to getting a wider base, so we're more stable and we're able to adapt to things that are out of our control. As I shared in my story, it didn't matter that I was a local government employee. It didn't matter that I was a high-performing employee. It didn't matter that I had a very good skill set at one specific thing. The decision was ultimately made based on politics and budgets that I had no influence over. And at the end of the day, none of that stuff mattered. So if you've been thinking about starting a side hustle, no matter whether that's a CNC router, CNC laser, or a different side hustle, the time to do it is now. So I want to give you a few first steps that you can take to start down this path. First thing, evaluate what you're passionate about. Maybe you already have an idea. Maybe you were like, I like this, or I saw this opportunity, but I'm not really the one to fill that niche. I disagree. And I think oftentimes we get overwhelmed by like, oh, I gotta start a business and I gotta do this and come up with a name and all these things. Yeah, but none of that stuff matters at first. The next step is proof of concept. Take your idea and like take 1/10 of it and just try it out. You don't need to like invest a bunch of money. You just need to get your feet wet and see if it's something that you want to do and that you want to continue. A lot of people jump in head first, especially into CNC stuff. And sadly, a lot of them find out that like, wow, this is more than I thought it was. Or wow, like the CNC just doesn't print money. And if they would have done a little research or maybe, went over to a friend or reached out to somebody that knew had a CNC and went and spent a day with them and found out like what the workflow is, they could have saved themselves so much money and so much headache. The next very important thing to do is assess market demand. We need to figure out what the demand is. And sometimes, I'll be honest, that doesn't necessarily exactly line up with our passions. I think maybe it can be half passion and half market demand, if that makes sense. There's always this battle of like, I see it all the time. People are like, oh, I make these things. This is my passion. This is what I love to do. I make these things, but no one buys them. Well, if you're going to start, that's just a hobby. That's not a side hustle. So you have to make sure there's some market demand for the things that you make or the service that you provide or something along those lines. Because after all, you want to make money doing it. Back when I was first getting started, I sort of did these things and I learned that I should have done all these things because it would have saved me a lot of time and effort. But I started this andybirdbuilds when I was still working that job. So there was about a 2-year overlap. So woodworking became my side hustle. I still had my main hustle at the time. And the initial reason why I started woodworking was because I needed a creative outlet to blow off steam. The day job wasn't going well, and I wanted something to distract me and to build cool things, and that's what I did. So that's how I got started. And then as I started building other things and posting them to social media, people would reach out and be like, hey, can you make this for me? Hey, can you make this for me? So I really didn't see if there was demand at first. It was more just like I was building things because I wanted to, and then it became a business. So to recap, 1, figure out what your passions are. Figure out what you like to do. 2, start small. 3, assess market demand. And again, you need to balance market demand with your passions, and there's a balance there. It might not be your passion is 100% market demand. So you need to balance those and tweak them. And I think we all do that. That's kind of a process of beating around the bush until you really, hit that nail on top of the head and you're like, okay, market demand, this is the product, boom. And it works that way. And that's a process. So my personal experiences and what I've learned and what I've gone through may or may not be applicable to you. But what I would say to everyone is to think about where you are now and where you want to be a year from now, where you want to be 5 years from now. And is what you're doing on a day-to-day basis going to get you where you want to be a year from now? Because if you don't do anything different, you're going to be in the same exact spot that you are a year from now, 5 years from now. The old saying goes something like, if you've always done what you've always have, then you'll always get what you've always got. By starting a side hustle and diversifying your skills and your income, you're only going to see and receive more and more opportunities to where you might not have seen them before because you were only looking through that one lens. If you have any personal stories or experiences with side hustles versus your career, I would love to hear them down in the comments. We'd all like to read them, so head down in the comments and share them with us, please. If you want to learn the path that I took to get into CNC woodworking, check this video out right here. You'll like it. Go check it out. I'll see you in that video.